Back in time, Bassmaster Magazine, May, June 1982. World record spot, Paris Lake, California. That wasn't my first experience with a world record spot, and mine was a very unique experience. My world record spotted bass experience was on Smith Lake, Alabama. And it was, at that time, that lake had the world record. It was like 7:15, 7:14. And I just won 2 classics and had to go do a Birmingham boat show back in Alabama that spring, in early spring, like February. And 2 guys from Jasper, Alabama, which is where Smith Lake is, picked me up. One of them was a Cadillac dealer, and I don't remember what the other gentleman did. But before the show started, they talked to me and they said, "Come on, go fishing with us on Smith Lake. And I go, blah, blah, blah. We want you to see how you would fish our lake. It's our favorite lake." And they did mention that it had big spotted bass in it. And I kept saying, no, no, no. Well, they wouldn't take no for an answer. And so they said, "We'll get you all your clothes you need, and, we'll drive." And so to make a long story short, the next morning, before the show started, we drove to Smith Lake, Alabama. And they go, "Well, what lure do you want to use?" I'd never been on Smith Lake in my life. Okay. I said, okay. I said, "Jig and pig." And they go, "What's a jig and pig?" And I had to tell them it was, a hair jig with the pork rind back in, Uncle Josh's pork rind on the back of it. So they stopped at this little tackle store, and thank goodness they had some, and we bought a handful. Went to the lake, and they launched the boat, and they said, "Well, where do you want to go?" I go, "Guys, I've never been on this lake." "Well, how would you fish it?" I said, "Okay, take me to your 2 biggest favorite creeks." And so they took me to this creek called Rock Creek. Everybody there probably knows Rock Creek by now. And they get in the creek and they stop and they go, "Okay, where do you want to start?" And I go, "Take me to the last 3 channel swing banks in the back of this creek." So when we got back there, they stopped on the 3rd one out. It's a channel swing bank. It's usually steep, and there it was. It's kind of bluff. And so we started fishing, and we get to the end of the channel swing bank, and where it swings away to go to the other side of the creek, there was a brush pile sticking up. And I threw that jig and pig out there and set the hook on a big bass. And I knew it was a big one. And anyway, I get it up, and the bass comes up funny and swirls on top. And these 2 guys with me went nuts. They started screaming, "World record! It's a world record!" And I'm going, "It's a very nice bass, but the world record's 22 pounds. I didn't know it was a spot." And I get it up there, and then I look, and I say, "Dang, that's not a largemouth. It's a spotted bass." And they net him, and we put him in the boat, and they immediately say, "We got to go, Wayne. This is the new world record." And I said, I'm starting to get excited,
On your first cast, your fishing day's over?
Yeah. Well, no, but anyway, we went in to the place and weighed him. He was 4 or 5 ounces under the world record. It was 7 something. I don't remember exactly what it was. But, and then of course they go into the typical rant. "I've fished here my whole life, and the biggest one I've ever caught is 5 pounds. And you on your first cat," which is so typical. We've heard this kind of story over and over in bass fishing. You take somebody to your private pond, and they catch the biggest bass you've ever seen come out of it. So, and I don't know why that happens. I don't know if it has to do something with the positive energy of the universe, that, you have so much energy, you attract that to you, and they've been mentioning it. But anyway, at that time, I was real close to my probably only world record bass of any kind. Now this lake, the world record I know is up in the 10-pound range in Paris Lake in California. This is another fascinating story. Water dog farms. Okay. I had a call. This was again shortly after I'd won a couple of classics, maybe somewhere in the early 80s. But Carl Lowrance, the inventor of Lowrance step finders, called me up and said, Rick, I want you to come up here and go fishing with me in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I said, really? He didn't tell me we were going to be fishing water dogs, okay?
Live ones.
Live ones.
Yeah.
And anyway, but it was interesting because on the way to the lake, we had talked about the depth finders. And one thing he did say to me at that time, which was interesting, was that he was so disappointed in the anglers, okay, because they were not using the depth finders the correct way. They were only using it to see the bottom. Now, I wonder nowadays what Carl would think about the modern lake trainers where fishermen are using them to see the fish and to catch the fish, because that was his point. He says, I designed these so you could see fish and catch fish. But anyway, we went on to the pond, and he got out these rods and reels, and all of a sudden pulls out a bucket full of water dogs. He owned these water dog farms, Lowrance water dog farms. And even when I saw him do it, he hooked it through the mouth, okay, and he had it on a cork and he threw it out there. And in fact, all those Paris landing records early on were caught on water dogs, net spotted bass. But and all of a sudden I'm watching, and I see this little water dog come crawling he's crawling up the line toward the cork. And he's holding on to the line.
No.
And no for me too. I just said, Carl, I can't do this. He says, why not? You know, he was an innovator, you know, obviously, but I saw that and I went, golly, I still won't forget that little water dog holding on the line, trying to get out of the water, crawling up the line, yeah.
So I'm guessing that's a salamander.
Yeah, I think it is salamanders. He calls water dogs, but I guess that's, no, he didn't say anything about salamander.
Just a water dog.
Just a water dog. See, let's see, 200, please send me 200 small 4 to 6 inch water dogs. Send me 150 medium 6 to 8 inch water dogs, or 100 large 8 to 10 inch water
Oh
dogs.
my gosh, 8 to 10 inch ones?
Yeah.
No.
And here's a man that has been not properly recognized by most modern day bass fishermen, including me. It's a guy named Dick Kotis. And he basically was an avid fisherman. Were not tournaments, so he didn't fish tournaments. Most of you would know him as the inventor of I can't pronounce it, Arbogast Lure Company, okay? And I'm very familiar with the company because I loved his jitterbug, okay? He made the hula popper and jitterbug and so many other baits. And the jitterbug was one of my all-time favorites. I've often kidded it's why I flunked out of college, because I had spent night on Town Lake in Austin fishing a jitterbug at night instead of studying. But he really had a lot of theories on this. And again, so many of our theories back then were not proven, but so many of his were really close to being accurate. And sadly, like I said, because he didn't get the recognition only through outdoor writers, which at this time were losing their credibility because of tournament fishing. People didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but his name was Dick Kotis, and hopefully I'm not pronouncing that completely wrong. But he went into barometric pressure, he went into wind and bass, and he said that they were talking about how wind ruins most all our good fishing days, and Dick said, I remember that view on wind and ruined more fishing trips than perhaps any other. He agreed, but Kotis went on to say that was the fault of the angler day at ruined your days, not the fault of the fish, because the fish were biting on windy days, and we all nowadays know how true that is. He went into temperature, he went into the importance of maps, habits of bass, and he was learning himself, so I wouldn't say he was dead on some of them, but he was way ahead of his time. These are tournaments again that Ron Shearer, he won that tournament on that earlier spoon I showed y'all in one of the earlier back in times
Yeah, but where's
on
the
Lake Okeechobee. He was working it over what we call the pepper grass. And Tommy Martin, Hemphill Gain was second. Larry Nixon was third, Hemphill Gain. Going down. You know, again, it's Angler of the Year right now was Tommy Martin. But back then, this was the other interesting thing. Bass switched for some reason from points in Angler of the Year to weight, okay, which really distorted the Angler of the Year, because you could beat a guy to 4 out of the 6 tournaments, and yet he had 2 big weight tournaments like Toledo being 81 pounds and another one, 81 pounds, and he's going to blow you away, because your tournaments, even though you won, if maybe 4 of them, you didn't have much weight. They were not big weight tournaments. But I just noticed that it was basically weights. And I'm 5th in the standings. Harold Allen was 3rd. Larry Nixon was 2nd, and Tommy Martin was 1st in the standings. Hemphill Gain were top 3 in the point standings. Again, this is fishing for the upcoming classics. The next ones was on Lake Bistineau in Louisiana, and it was nothing but a giant cypress tree lake. It wasn't very big, but it had so many cypress trees, it looked big because you couldn't see the other boats in it. And it was, again, there was really kind of some neat comments, because the locals said the locals would not do well here, and here's why they said. Bistineau bass are different. The experts decreed, they don't bite, they taste the lure first. And if they don't like it, they spit it out. BS. BS. So anyway, and then they started quoting me, and I wasn't totally accurate either. It said, Rick Clunn, who some say said it, sandpapered his fingers before this tournament so he could feel the bite, since the local said the bite was so gentle you wouldn't feel it. I did not do that, but somehow somebody said I did. Then also it says, Clunn, who spews finny facts like a computer chips, which was his earlier trade, amazes. He says about a lure color for the tournament. Black on black, jig and pork is best, not brown. Everything that drops off the trees, moss, is brown. Well, we know that's not true. Probably the most popular color nowadays is pumpkin, which is brown, or one of the most. So it's always interesting to go back and see us spewing out our opinions. Well, that concludes another of the 1982 May-June issues.